Good day, fans. Coach Johnson. It's a bonus video. I wanted to do this video for my Friday Fitness Facts, but I had another topic come up, so I'm going to do it as a bonus video to help people understand the nomenclature of anatomy, physiology, personal training, biomechanics, yada, yada, yada. So I put together a list of words that trainers and people in the physical fitness or physical therapy world often use. So that if you hear them, you know what they mean. So sometimes people use fancy words just so they sound smart or knowledgeable, and sometimes they use them because they're actually the most accurate word, or a combination of both. So let's get started. So the first word we're going to talk about is origin. And origin refers to the beginning point of a muscle or a tendon. And actually, muscles are always attached to bones with tendons and hooks that go into the bone. So the origin is basically the closest part to the center of the body. That's where the muscle originates, and then it goes out to the insertion. The insertion is the other end. The insertion is a part where it attaches to whatever it's supposed to move. And we're talking about voluntary muscles here, not like your heart or your things like that. So origin, beginning, generally speaking, the origin is going to be closer to the middle of the body. Not always, but almost always. And the insertion will be farther away, which brings us to our next two terms, which is proximal and distal. Proximal means close to, distal means farther away. So if there's 2 points, the proximal point will be the closest one to where you are or to where the target is, and the distal will be the farthest one away. Pretty easy stuff. If you know basic Latin, this is pretty easy stuff. All right, the next terms I want to talk to are muscle movements, and that is 3 terms: eccentric, concentric, and isometric. Eccentric means the muscle is moving while it is lengthening. Well, I mean, it's moving, but it's resisting while it's lengthening. So, for example, if I'm doing a curl, when I'm bringing the bar down, that is the eccentric part of the muscular contraction. So the eccentric means it is lengthening, but still resisting. And this is where a lot of the muscle soreness comes in. Now, the opposite would be concentric. That means I grab the bar, and now I'm bringing it up. So the muscle is resisting, but it's shortening. That is concentric. And isometric means it's not moving at all, but it's still resisting. So if I do this motion where I push my hands together and I'm pushing, the muscles are contracting and they're providing force, but there's no difference in length. So there's no shortening, there's no lengthening. That is an isometric contraction. Like holding a plank position would be an isometric work. A wall sit, things of that nature. Okay, so now our next set of terms are more involving exercise and body movement. That is aerobic. Aerobic means literally with oxygen. So now basically every movement has a combination of aerobic and the other one, which is anaerobic, which means without oxygen. Aerobic generally means in the physical fitness world that the primary energy system that you're using to perform that function is able to be continued with the introduction of oxygen. So you're breathing. Generally speaking, it's a lower intensity level, so you can utilize the Krebs cycle to convert oxygen and body fat into energy. It's a bit of a process to do that, so it's not going to be a high energy source, and it's not going to be a short duration. It doesn't happen right away. It takes a couple of minutes to get there. Anaerobic, on the other hand, is what literally the vast majority of our movements are. And so if I reach over here and I pick up this bottle of water, that's anaerobic. If I did this, pick this bottle of water up and put it down for several minutes, since it's a low intensity, at some point my muscles would kick into an aerobic system because I could use that energy cycle because it's low intensity, but it takes a while for your muscles to go through the process. And I didn't put this on the list, but I want to cover this. The energy system for anaerobic basically goes from phosphate conversion to glycogen conversion, and then when the glycogen runs out, then you switch into the anaerobic. Phosphates is ADP or adenosine triphosphate, which converts to energy in the muscle cells, and then pulls from creatine, which then adds another phosphate molecule on there, so it breaks down again. So ATP goes to ADP, adenosine diphosphate. As long as that can be rebuilt, that cycle will continue. Then you switch into glycogen conversion. That glycogen is the muscle's supply of its own sugar, chains of glucose molecules, if you will. When those break down, the byproduct is lactic acid, and that's where you get the burning. And then, now, obviously, if the intensity still demands there, once that anaerobic supply is gone, the muscle will fail. So if the intensity lowers, then you can switch to the aerobic system and you can continue the movement. So I hope that's not too confusing. Probably was, but if you have questions, send me a note. All right, next terms I want to use are BMR and RMR. BMR stands for basal metabolic rate. And what that means is that's the energy required to keep your body alive. So if you were in a coma, you would have a certain amount of expenditure of energy to keep your heart going, your lungs going, your brain activity going, blood vessels repairing, bringing food to the body to repair cells, regeneration, hair growth. That's your basal metabolic rate. And that's a real low number, generally speaking. That is the minimum energy to keep what's called homeostasis. Homeostasis means your body is consistent. You're not growing, you're not shrinking, you're not getting heavier, you're not getting lighter. That's stasis means same. So the next one is RMR, and that's resting metabolic rate, and that's a little bit different. So although we have a basal metabolic rate, the minimum energy required to exist on the planet, your resting metabolic rate is things like what I'm doing now. I'm sitting. I'm not expending any energy other than just the bare minimum just to breathe and move my head around and basically rest or sleep or sit. So RMR is a little bit higher than BMR, but not a whole lot because it's not taking a whole lot of energy to keep my posture up here. I have a chair, I can sit back, I can lean, so it's pretty low. And then you have your daily metabolic rate, and that is the energy to do not only keep you alive, but to fuel the movements you have, whether it's walking around the floor, whether it's going exercising, whether it's going to the kitchen to get food, whether it's catching food, whether it's whatever it is. So your daily metabolic rate, for most people, if the average, like for me, it's about 2,400 calories on a normal day. Obviously, if I do a ton of exercise, my daily metabolic rate will be higher. If I just literally lay around all day, then it's a little lower. Same thing for everybody else. The heavier you are, the more mass you have, the higher your basic and resting metabolic rate will be. And also, the more calories you will use moving around to move that much extra mass. Whether it's muscle or whether it's body fat, changes a little bit, but still, more mass, more calories needed to move, higher daily metabolic rate or resting metabolic rate or basal metabolic rate. Okay. Now, the last one we're going to do is called heart rate reserve. Now, when people want to calculate aerobic zone, anaerobic zone, fat burning zone, all this kind of stuff, you need to know a couple of things. What the common formula is to take the number 220 and subtract your age. And that'll give you a theoretical maximal heart rate. For example, if you're 30 years old, your theoretical maximal heart rate would be 190. That means theoretically 190 is the absolute maximum your heart rate can go or without sustaining damage. I guess it's very malleable. It's just a measurement. It's a theoretical maximum, not an absolute maximum. So what the heart rate reserve is, you take your maximal potential heart rate, then you subtract your resting heart rate. Let's say your resting heart rate is 70. So let's take a 30-year-old, because we have 220 minus 30, which is your age, leaves us 190. Then you subtract 70, which is your resting heart rate, which leaves a heart rate reserve between your resting heart rate and your maximal heart rate of 120, if my math is correct. Now that's where the percentages come from: aerobic, anaerobic, fat burning, intensity, cardio zone. And again, this isn't a big deal to me as a trainer much, unless you are like going to be doing a marathon, triathlon, something involving endurance, because I want people to get up into past the fat burning zone, if you will, of heart rate. But then I want them to cycle back down, so we get high intensity interval training. If your intervals only taking you into like the 60% of your heart rate reserve, and that would be 60% of 120 plus the 70 of your resting, kind of complicated. Then that would be, I would not consider it a high intensity interval training. That would just be, I guess, low intensity interval training. But if you're doing like a marathon or a half marathon, you want to get into that fat burning zone, because it's a consistent, pacing. Because you remember, like I talked about before, I want those muscles to be able to contract and operate consistently without going into the lactic acid producing zone, which is higher, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so a lot of stuff, guys. Hope that makes sense to you guys. Origin, insertion, proximal, distal, eccentric, concentric, isometric, aerobic, anaerobic, BMR, RMR, DMR, I think I made that one up, daily metabolic rate, RHR, resting heart rate, which your heart beats when you're at rest, and heart rate reserve. So now you are halfway on your way to being a personal trainer. Yes. People pay a lot of money for this stuff, guys. I'm happy to share it. Hope you have a good time. Enjoy your day. If you have questions, as always, you can contact me.